Welcome back. You're watching Market Sense. We've got DK Joshi, who's Director and Chief Economist at CRISIL, now joining us on the show to talk to us about the macroeconomic environment. And we're going to speak to him largely in view of the whole inflation situation expected to get out of control and the monsoon, the impact of that on growth and inflation. Now, DK, to begin with, given that I think everyone seems agreed that we are going to have a weak monsoon, though we don't have an official statement to that effect as yet, have you already started reworking your growth numbers and your inflation numbers for the current year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see a upside to inflation and a downside to growth, and I think we are in a process of releasing our outlook today. Clearly, I think monsoons, if they remain subpar, and I think the indications are that they could be almost 15% below normal. I think what that will do is I think that will shave off certain percentage points from GDP, because last year we had record output, and to grow our record output in a weak monsoon scenario is very difficult. So I think I think the agriculture is very likely to remain flat in 12-13, and that will shave off a couple of percentage points from overall growth, because we were working earlier with the assumption of normal monsoons, which yielded 6.5% growth. And as far as inflation is concerned, I think particularly in the rain-fed crops, which are particularly jowar, bajra, and also pulses and some oil seeds, I think we'll see more pressure on inflation going ahead. Rice and wheat, I think we are still okay, because we have enough buffer stock, and if it is released in a timely manner, I think that can keep inflation in these two cereals under check. But I think for others we remain vulnerable.
Mr. Joshi, afternoon, if we take a look at your report, it's been a 5.5% GDP growth projection. Don't you think that would be a tad overly pessimistic?
Well, I think, as I said, see, if agriculture is flat, which is 0% growth in agriculture, I think that will itself shave off about 45 basis points from growth. And I think if that has spillover effects on industry and services, so I think close to 70 basis point decline in growth is coming purely from monsoons. And the other factor that we have built into our 5.5% growth forecast is the worsening of Eurozone scenario. S&P has recently downgraded the Eurozone growth from 0% to minus 0.6% for 2012, and I think that means more downside to our exports and also to the IT/ITS segment. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that if you combine both of them, you get about 100 basis point decline in growth. Now, our forecast doesn't factor in any generous stimulus from the government. Obviously, I think we will have some drought relief measures, etc. But the kind of stimulus that government gave in 2009-10, where I think they more than offset the impact of drought on overall growth, because that year was, I think, almost as bad as this year in terms of rainfall deficiency, but the overall growth was 8.4%. That kind of stimulus we are not factoring in, because the fiscal pressure is quite strong vis-a-vis what happened in 2009-10. So I think our forecast does exclude a generous dose of stimulus. If that happens, obviously I think that will create an upside to this number. And what can also create an upside to this number is that if monsoons revive in the remaining part, and revive much more faster than what even the IMD expects, I think you can't rule that out. I think that itself will create some upside to agriculture growth in the Rabi season. But if that doesn't happen, I think, and if then I think we don't see much upside to 5.5% growth. The other factor which I wanted to highlight is, I think if the problems in some of the bottlenecks that are plaguing the economy are sorted out, like the mining issue, availability of coal, etc., that also can create some upside to growth. So I think if government does take proactive action, I think we could see that growth could go above 5.5%. But in a base case scenario, I think the assumptions are yielding 5.5% growth.
Right. Now, DK, everyone's beginning to already factor in the likelihood of a farm loan waiver, which, assuming the 2008 number, you're talking of a similar level of something like 40,000 crores, and the likelihood of the government going easy on addressing the issue of subsidies because we are in a high inflationary environment. how worried would you be about the government's inability to meet the fiscal deficit target?
Well, I think it's going to be a very challenging task, and I think they will have to depend on things like, I think one-off items could come in handy here. I think if the spectrum auctions go off well, or if I think they manage to divest some public sector stake, I think that can come in handy at this juncture. But otherwise, I think in a low growth environment, particularly where corporate profits are coming down and where industry is not doing well, I think it's a bit tough to raise taxes, and your expenditure requirements are increasing because of drought. Or I mean a likelihood of a drought. So I think in that scenario, keeping a check on the fiscal deficit is going to be a very, very challenging task. And I think we see the deficit target clearly being breached because of two reasons. One, growth coming down, and also I think because the expenditure requirements have increased now.
And finally, Mr. Joshi, what would be your overall assessment as to how worrying the overall monsoon scenario is going to be? Because on one hand, we are teetering on the brink of a drought, and on the other hand, the overall contribution to the agricultural output, monsoon is just about 15%.
That's right. I think I think it doesn't see it's happening in a scenario where the growth is already down. I mean, I think our earlier forecast was 6.5%. So I think monsoon comes as an unwelcome thing. I mean, a monsoon failure comes as something undesirable at this juncture. So it's pulling that growth down from that level. Had we been growing at 8.5%, had that been the base case, then monsoons don't have the ability to pull the growth down so much. But yeah, I think directly, I think if GDP growth in agriculture goes down from 3%, which we assumed earlier, to 0%, that shaves off close to 40 to 45 basis points from overall growth, only on the basis of share of agriculture in GDP. And I think the spillover into other sectors also has an impact. So I think overall about 75 basis points can be shaved off if we get 0% growth in agriculture. So I think its relevance as far as the overall economy is concerned is coming down. But at this juncture, when we already have a weak growth scenario, I think it was critical to have normal monsoons.
Thanks very much then, Mr. Joshi, for taking the time out and joining in with the detailed analysis of that CRISIL report on the overall economy. But some important flash